Have you guys ever wondered why trade wars occur, or why world leaders like Donald Trump impose high tariffs, or how trade wars have affected the world before? Well, I'm here to talk about it from the origins of trade wars to the economic theories behind tariffs, and I'll be talking about it while I do my makeup. What are trade wars and why do countries take part in them? So trade wars have their roots in economic theories and practices, and mercantilism plays an influential role in these practices. And for those of you who don't know, mercantilism is a theory that nations can get wealthier through more trade, which leads to more power. And mercantilism dominated European economic thoughts from the 16th century to the 18th century. And it's also considered to be the foundation of historical trade wars. And if you were following the news today, you would see this practice in live action, with President Trump initiating a trade war to boost American production, and the president of China retaliating with high tariffs of its own. So why must there be a war? Why can't everyone just trade what their countries produce fairly and equally? Well, unfortunately, the world is run by people who don't really care about being fair, particularly if they are mercantilists. Mercantilists believe that the world's resources are finite, and one nation's gain is another nation's loss. So they will always try to win or gain more because they view any other circumstance as either a loss or a potential for a loss. Some other principles of mercantilism include maintaining a favorable balance of trade with the goal of exporting rather than importing, aka selling more than they're buying. And there's also an encouragement of strong government intervention to ensure that that happens. And this theory will always prioritize state power over individual or global interest. A perfect example of this includes the Opium Wars in the 19th century, which started because the British were frustrated with the trade imbalance that they were experiencing with China because they were using silver to pay China for goods like tea and silk. So to counteract this, the British began to illegally export opium from India to China, which started a mass wave of addiction and social problems within Chinese society. And it eventually got so bad that it led to military intervention and eventually the Chinese having to pay reparations to the British, and Hong Kong was also surrendered to the British. Now, it was around the 19th century when early economists like Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations, challenged mercantilism and pushed for free trade and less government intervention. Smith also introduced the theory of absolute advantage, which suggested that nations should simply focus on the goods that they're able to produce abundantly and efficiently, which would lead to fairer trade. And another man named David Ricardo basically echoed Smith's theories, and he proposed a theory of comparative advantage. And this theory suggested that even if a nation was able to produce goods more cheaply than other nations, they can still trade with others in a way that would benefit everyone involved. Now, despite these theories, protectionist practices, or practices that protect nations from foreign competition, have persisted throughout history, and we absolutely see them enforced today. So back in 2018, during Trump's first presidency, he announced higher tariffs on aluminum and steel production from China. And then China retaliated with tariffs on $3 billion worth of U.S. goods. And then the U.S. hit them with 10% tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, and then raised it to 25% the following year in 2019. And this led to a disruption in supply chains, raising the price of production, not just in America, but in several other countries as well. And this also impacted the GDP of the US and China, resulting in a reduction of 1.35% and 1.41%. China also lost $24 billion in their soybean market, and US tech companies that relied on Chinese manufacturing were impacted as well. And this also led to a shift in supply chains away from China. So countries like Mexico, Thailand, Vietnam, South Korea saw a surge in their exportation. And this trade war ended in 2020 when the US and China signed a Phase 1 deal, which basically told China that they have to buy $200 billion worth of US goods. But apparently, according to a research group, China didn't buy any of the goods that they promised that they would. Now, during his presidency, Biden also retained many of Trump's existing tariffs, and he also issued new restrictions and raised tariffs on electric vehicles and solar cells, steel, aluminum, and medical equipment. And in February of this year, the US imposed 10% tariffs on all imports from China. And then China retaliated with countermeasures against US coal, gas, and agricultural machinery. So none of us can really say what will happen once the trade wars blow over or a new deal is signed, but we can already see that the markets have already been dramatically affected by all of this. And though we can't predict the future, we can absolutely look back to see how similar circumstances affected the world. For example, in 1930, the U.S. raised import taxes for over 900 goods by 40 to 60%. And this was known as the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, and it was intended to protect American businesses from foreign competition. But this ended up backfiring, and other countries imposed retaliatory tariffs like what we're seeing today. And many economists say that this exacerbated the Great Depression. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen again, but regardless, we have seen some dramatic moves by world leaders on the world stage, and everyone is taking note of it. Now, there's a lot more that I can talk about, but for the sake of this video, I kept it pretty short. But I'm curious to know what you guys think regarding what may happen between the US and China or other countries, what might happen to the economy, and I also would love to know what you guys want me to talk about next. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, all sources in the comments.